All right, when you hear the name Khan, I bet one guy pops into your head, right? Genghis. But today, we're going to talk about his grandson, Kublai Khan. And this guy, he lived this incredible double life, constantly torn between the Mongol steppe he came from and the imperial throne of China he came to rule. His story is all about that struggle, that constant pull between two completely different worlds. So the whole thing really boils down to this one question that defines his entire life. Was he a Mongol warlord or a Chinese emperor? I mean, was he the heir to this unstoppable nomadic war machine, or was he the ruler of one of the oldest, most advanced civilizations on Earth? And here's the thing. The answer is he was both. And that's what's so wild. His entire reign was this incredible, high-stakes balancing act between two identities that honestly should not have been able to exist in one person. That's the story we're going to dive into. So let's get into it. We're going beyond the Great Khan. You got to ask, how did he even get into this position? To figure that out, we've got to rewind a bit and see what made his path so different from his grandpa Genghis.
Okay, so let's break it down. Who exactly was Kublai Khan? Well, first off, he's Genghis Khan's grandson. He inherited the Mongol Empire when it was at its absolute peak. We're talking massive. But here's the twist. Unlike a lot of his fellow Mongols, he grew up genuinely admiring Chinese culture. So this put him in a really tough spot. He faced this huge choice. Should he just keep doing the family business, conquering everything in sight? Or should he try something totally different and actually rule?
And that brings us to the moment he forged the Yuan Dynasty. He made his choice, and it was a huge one. He decided not just to conquer China, but to become its emperor, founding a whole new dynasty that would completely change the game.
And check out this timeline. It shows you just how deliberate he was. This was no accident. First, in 1260, he locks down his title as Great Khan of the whole Mongol Empire. But then, only about a decade later, he does something wild. He completely pivots and declares the start of the Yuan Dynasty, a Chinese dynasty, with him as emperor. And by 1279, he pulls off something no one had managed for centuries. He completely unifies all of China.
And to put that into perspective, we are talking about 60 million people. Think about that for a second. This wasn't some nomadic tribe he was leading. This was a vast, complex, ancient civilization he was now in charge of. The scale is just mind-boggling. Right. So this wasn't just another conquest. That's the key takeaway here. It was the start of something totally new, a whole new kind of empire. The fighting might have been over, but the real challenge, building this new thing, was just beginning. Which leads us to the big question. How on earth did he pull it off? How did he manage to be a ruler of two worlds, to be the Mongol Khan and the Chinese emperor at the very same time? I mean, just look at the contrast here. On the one hand, you've got Mongol tradition. It's all about a nomadic lifestyle, a strict military hierarchy, and whatever the Khan says goes. Then, on the other hand, you have Chinese governance. We're talking a massive, established bureaucracy, deep-rooted Confucian principles, and all these incredibly detailed court rituals. They are polar opposites, and he had to bridge that gap. So what did he do? He started building a new China, blending ideas from both sides. For starters, he set up a new capital, Dadu, which, is modern-day Beijing. He used that Mongol military might to make the Silk Road super safe, kicking off this amazing era of peace and trade called the Pax Mongolica. But then he also leaned into Chinese ideas, implementing paper money across the empire, showing a surprising amount of tolerance for different religions, and commissioning these huge public works projects. It was a real mix. But let's be clear, he never forgot who was boss. He set up this really rigid social hierarchy, a four-class system. Right at the top, Class 1, the Mongols, of course, the ruling elite. Right below them in Class 2 were the Semu. These were their non-Mongol allies, foreigners from Central Asia and Europe who helped them run things. And then, way down in Classes 3 and 4, you finally get to the Chinese. The Northern Chinese were third, and the Southern Chinese, the last ones to be conquered, were at the very bottom. This whole system had one purpose, to make sure the Mongols stayed firmly in control. All right, so this new empire was a powerhouse, but everything has its limits. Let's talk about the empire's reach and, well, its limits. This is where Kublai's seemingly unstoppable ambition finally hit a brick wall. And for a long time, his reign was a huge success. You can see the triumphs right here. A massive chunk of his achievement, like half of it, was in trade and the economy. They just exploded thanks to those safe trade routes. Then you have the stability and unification he brought to China, a huge deal. And finally, You can't forget the incredible cultural exchange he made possible between East and West.
But that Mongol conqueror inside him never really went away, and his ambition, which seemed to have no limits on land, was about to meet its match at sea.
He decided he wanted Japan, so in 1274, he sends this massive fleet, but they get pushed back. Now, Kublai doesn't take no for an answer. He spends the next 7 years building an even bigger invasion force. Seriously, one of the largest armadas the world had ever seen. He launches it in 1281. And just when it seems like nothing can stop him, a typhoon hits. A monster storm, and it completely wipes out his fleet.
And this, right here, is where we get the word kamikaze. It literally means divine wind. The Japanese were convinced that the gods had sent these 2 typhoons to save them from the Mongol invasion. It was this divine wind that saved their country and handed Kublai Khan the single biggest defeat of his entire life.
So after all that, what do we make of him? What is the Khan's complicated legacy? What's the lasting impact of this guy who's stuck between the Mongol saddle and the Chinese throne?
Well, it depends on who you ask. History really sees him in a few different ways. For some, he's forever the Mongol conqueror. For others, he's remembered as a great Chinese emperor, even if he wasn't ethnically Chinese. And then there's the view of him as a global connector, the man who really opened up the lines of communication between East and West. And you know what? None of those views are wrong. He was all of those things.
There's this quote that just perfectly sums up the challenge he faced. I have heard that one can conquer the empire on horseback, but one cannot govern it on horseback. Think about that. Conquering, that was the easy part for a Mongol. That's what they did. But to actually govern, that meant he had to get off the horse and become something completely new. And here's the final crucial piece of the puzzle. For all his incredible skill, his dynasty, which had united China, it lasted less than 100 years after his death. The whole system he built just wasn't sustainable. That social structure that kept Mongols on top, it created a ton of resentment. And frankly, his successors just didn't have his unique talent for walking that tightrope between 2 cultures. The balancing act was just too difficult to keep up.
So that leaves us with the big question. Was Kublai Khan a conqueror who just assimilated, who got absorbed by this massive culture he took over? Or was he a true visionary who built a bridge between worlds, even if only for a short time? It's a tough one, and the answer, a lot like the man himself, is anything but